We've been going over 3 years now, I guess, haven't we, Lalo?
Yeah, I was just actually off camera before you came in. I was just telling our guests that we just started our fourth year. So yeah, yeah.
My gosh, this is phenomenal. We're going to be talking about something today that not only goes to, some of the fundamentals of what you should be doing as far as your compliance area and what you should be doing, but getting into some advanced techniques and tactics and procedures and whatnot. So looking forward to this. There's a lot of things that have, I guess, upped the ante. I was just saying off camera here that with any duty drawbacks or any, imports and exports, quite frankly, if you can take advantage of any of the trade programs, the what was I'm trying to say, the trade deals between countries. I've just gone blank. I tell you, my elevator like sometimes just doesn't make it all the way up. Anyway, if you're going to take advantage of that, the data elements and some of the records have actually increased as far as what you should be storing. And so that's something that we're going to get into and talk about. But I will say, the things in your company too, people need to be getting not only refreshers and building that foundation of knowledge, but also expanding their knowledge with some of the courses that you guys are able to offer from GDC.
Right. No, yeah, that's true. But so right now it is, that time where folks need to realize that none of this is going away. Of course, I think some might at first have been like sitting in like a wait and see type situation, but obviously this is here to stay. And this is the one thing that I like to always point out. Because of the current trade situation, we have seen companies that are now doing things in their trade programs that they knew about, but they hadn't been doing. I always talk about USMCA because, of course, being here on the border with US and Mexico, we see that a lot here. NAFTA was a big deal, USMCA is a big deal. So now people are implementing USMCA programs when they never did before. And same goes with Drawback. Folks are now looking at Drawback and saying that's another avenue for us to recover some of our revenue. So anyway, we had some folks that used to do training for us back in the day for Drawback, CITTA customs brokers.
Mm-hmm. So Simran, I love the background you've got. Where are you located there?
We're in Ogden, Utah, and this
There,
is
okay.
actually our new office. This October, it's going to be literally a year since we moved, and there's a temple behind. So
Mhm.
and we have a lovely view, the mountain, and it's just
Yes.
perfect. I mean,
Well, I
it's a
saw the
long way.
mountain and it's like, yeah, that looks like some nice area. So have you been there long?
Been here 3 years now. I
Okay.
can now call myself a Utahn, is what they say.
Well, have you picked up snow skiing?
No, long way, long way. I will say I was not an outdoorsy person, but now I'm all into hiking and trekking and trails and all of those things. So baby steps, but I'll get there. I'll get there this year, I hope.
Isn't it beautiful? It's like the sky, you're closer to the sky out there or something. I don't know. It's just beautiful, isn't it?
It's stunning. And it's such a good time of the year too. Like it's fall, there's fall and frost. So there's snow and there's fall colors. Perfect time. Amazing time.
Fantastic. All right. Well, listen, we need to get into some things. This isn't, we talk about how beautiful it is out there all day long. So you're into looking at what I was talking about earlier here is on the duty drawback with the dramatic changes
Mm.
and almost minute by minute, hour by hour type changes. Some of these with the trade deals that are going through, and then you've got added duties, they're taken away, they're added, all this kind of stuff, and the ups and downs. What's been going on from a duty drawback perspective? Because one of the things I want to get into is, back to folks, you got to have a foundation on what are the key things, and archive is one of them, and we're going to get into some of that. But it's like the bar has been raised, especially for duty drawback as well as your basic importations.
Yeah, absolutely. And Andy, I feel like this is one of the most complex trade environments we've seen. Trade policy has become so unpredictable. One
Hmm.
policy, one new announcement, and it can change the entire economics of a supply chain. So it's pretty huge what's going on, duty drawback as a whole. I remember I was at the AEI conference a couple of months ago, and I think about that conference versus conferences that I've done in the past, say even a year ago, where I used to be sitting at a table and, most people in the trade, obviously a lot of people in the trade world will know about duty drawback, but nobody will really talk about it or knows the intricacies of it. 1 year earlier, there was a certain explanation that had to go out. And today at AEI, a couple of months ago when I was sitting, people were talking about duty drawback already before I even made that introduction. That's the change we've seen. That's the level of change we've seen. All eyes, I feel like, are on duty drawback right now because I feel like everything has converged in a way. The government shutdown, the tariff situation, CBP still working, but also the processing has become slow. It's all converged to come into one thing. But the one thing that we're seeing is that people now want to apply for duty drawback. It's not just a special project. It's also like a strategic tool where people think this is a good financial decision more than just a small one-time thing because you're spending so much on your duties that now you want to recover it. So from a duty drawback standpoint, it's been a lot of ups and downs, but I feel like it's gotten all eyes on duty drawback, which I feel like from I might be a little biased, but about time. About time.
Well,
And
and Lalo, you made a great point earlier is that let me rephrase that, companies and executive management especially are probably investigating or opening up the door to doing more things we were talking about duty drawback or other types of things in the import export supply chain than they've ever done before because in the past it probably wasn't worth the time and effort. Now it's significant, right?
but now also there's also this other thing. I didn't know about this until I read a blog article that Simran also is getting ready, or that is posted on their website. You'll be able to find that link here on our show notes. But I didn't realize. So I'm discovering things about things like this, right? So there's drawback, and I thought, well, drawback, you go and file and you get your money back and all that. But I didn't realize there was like you can level up on drawback, right? Is that drawback privileges, right?
Yes.
So I didn't realize there was such a thing. So I mean, maybe we can get started with like that. I mean, maybe a lot of folks don't know that exists.
Yeah, accelerated. Sorry, go ahead, Andy.
Well, I was just going to, and before you get in, just so everybody, there maybe a few folks are going drawback. I don't know what that means. What drawback means that you've imported as a company, let's say a big shipment of, let's say 10,000 widgets, and you paid $1,000 in duties and taxes. And so then you consume that, let's say 8,000 into the US, that's domestic, but 2,000 you've sold to outside the country. And so you can draw back, if you will, or get a refund on the duties you've paid. So that's what it is. But it's just like, you have to file a certain form and process and all that to get a refund from the government. So,
And the really cool thing is that you can do, and I love this example because for obvious reasons, you can be importing scotch from Scotland, whiskey, but let's say you make bourbon in the US and you're exporting that back to Scotland so that they can taste what real whiskey should be like. No, I'm kidding. No,
man, we're going to get it on that one.
I'm kidding, guys. I'm kidding.
Complete digress.
Like
this conversation has potential to digress.
So
yeah, it's going to be fun.
You can get the drawback on that import because they're like items, correct?
So yes, I mean, there's so much into it, and without getting into the nitty gritties, I wouldn't be able to comment, but it can be, it can come under manufactured drawback that, it was manufactured in a new product, or, we can claim under, and again, this is not a type of drawback as much as how you claim it, either direct ID substitution was substituting one against the other. Again, without knowing the intricacies of it, I wouldn't be able to comment on that. And that's probably the diplomatic lawyer side in me being like, okay, I probably would not. But yes, you can claim drawback. And that's the best part about it. Like if you've paid money, that's legally yours if you're getting it out back and you're exporting it, which is the beauty of it, which is amazing.
Well, excellent. So in that, there's also with the different trade deals, I mean, you obviously, let's go with the basics. Right now, you have to keep track of what you have purchased, when you purchased it, and when you imported that in, under what entries and whatnot, and what you've done there. But then when you are going to claim whatever's exported, and when you file a duty drawback, you're saying, okay, I'm doing a drawback. I've exported, 10,000 widgets here against this set of imports. And here's the import entries, I guess.
Yes.
With the documentation, that's your basic documentation. Here's a entry copy, commercial invoices, the values and all that. And when it came in, now here's the shipment going out. Here's the bill of lading, all those things and commercial invoices. But in addition to that, now I guess there's some more data elements like literally the date of manufacture on some things, I believe, and what was used and all that. There's little things like that people have
Yes.
not necessarily recorded in the past.
Yep.
When it comes to the supply chain, they've recorded it, when this batch is recorded. But now you're having to incorporate that into your supply chain records and archive, right?
Yes, I will say that CBP, and obviously it's not just CBP, I mean, regulation demanded that. They have been very, very thorough about documentation. I mean, I want to say most, if not all, claims or applications that are denied happen because of poor documentation. So, a good point on the manufacturing. I do feel like, these requirements have always been there, but now it's coming to the forefront a lot more in terms of urgency, in terms of how important it is to have everything. Just because, I mean, you can imagine we're in a shutdown situation. We're in a situation where CBP is understaffed. It's the processing time is taking so long. When they resume, which they obviously will, when things go back to normal, they're going to want to expedite the situation. They're going to want to, make sure that their workload is lessened, and they're going to want to do that fast. And so you can imagine they're not going to want to sit and look at applications that are incomplete. And that's the biggest thing. I mean, for me, yes, these requirements have always been there, but there's a need to look into your own internal policies now while you have the time, because there is a certain gap, a small one, albeit, that we can use to make sure that our documentation is fine. I mean, from an unused perspective, you're tracking import to export with your receipt inventory, your withdrawal inventory. You make sure that it's a one track item. When it's a manufacturing, like Andy, you were mentioning, it's also when it goes into production, when it comes out of production, your bill of materials, what are you exporting, all of those things. It's how you are able to tie those loose ends is a big thing with CBP. Because, I mean, we always keep coming back to this thing, and CBP keeps saying that drawback is a privilege, not a right. And so they like making sure that you deserve the money that you're getting back. I mean, obviously, companies know that this money is legally theirs, but it's money going out of the government. So they want to make sure that, you are compliant, your internal policies are in place. And now more so than ever in, my experience so far.
Well, real quick, my guess is that there's a lot more applications obviously coming in, but my guess is that a lot of them may be coming in quite accurate or well filled. Like, in other words, there might not be any issues, and they get past that because of software, especially like nowadays with AI. But because of that, if you're saying that they're taking longer to process, that's the bottleneck that we're seeing? And then back to my original question, is that the reason why you might want to do drawback privileges versus just regular drawback, or am I misunderstanding that?
No, so I'll address this. I'll address your second question first. Drawback privileges should be done. There's no reason why you shouldn't do it. I mean, that's with or without the new tariff situation, the shutdown situation. It's something that should be done, because regular drawback is just you not applying for accelerated payment and then waiting in a long queue for your claims to get liquidated. When you apply for privileges, what you're doing is you're essentially asking CBP to grant you the privilege and to grant you the accommodation, basically, by giving you money even before you file the claim. So they will get, a sample, and they'll be like, okay, you seem compliant. You don't seem sketchy. You have internal policies in place. You feel compliant. And so we're going to give you an accelerated payment. And, you can keep filing claims and we'll keep liquidating it, but you don't have to wait for so long. We're paying you in advance. That is the privilege. All companies can apply for it as long as the internal documentation is strong and the policies are strong and everything else looks good. Versus, where you've not applied for the privilege and you're just waiting in a long queue, which is not what most companies do. We would not even recommend that. Accelerated privileges is with or without the whole current situation.
Okay.
That That would be one. Yes, I would say the real bottleneck here is in two places. A, CBP is understaffed. It's taking longer to have these things processed. I mean, they're doing the best they can, but the bottleneck is that, the processing time has increased. And the second thing is they've also issued a notification saying that they've, going to be stopping payments essentially. So there's also a cash flow bottleneck that we're looking at this point, because so many companies, the small ones, the medium ones, they will look at this drawback money to essentially help with their next shipments, or it's not just some money. It's money that's going into something else. And so the bottleneck also comes from a cash flow perspective. And of course, to your point, AI is so helpful. I mean, automation has changed the game, I feel, and definitely that helps in accelerating and expediting it. But again, having said that, I will say a human touch a little bit is always good.
With the dramatic changes of the trade deals that are constantly going back and forth, what do you recommend for somebody that is maybe a seasoned professional? They've never really maybe utilized duty drawback. Maybe they have, but sporadic. Or if they're doing it now, it's like, is there something that you would recommend and say, you need to go in and check your archives to make sure you have this? Again, duty drawback comes back to how accurate and detailed your archive is, really.
Yep.
If it comes
Absolutely.
down to it, because in looking at filing the forms, you got to have somebody who knows what they're doing. Obviously, your company's one, but it's all based on how accurate and good your data is. So what would you tell me is like, all right, Andy, you need to go in and check for X.
Right. And Andy, I think you make a really valid point. If I were somebody, or if I had to recommend somebody who's entering duty drawback or who's using this opportunity, I would at least start with two things. Look at your internal documentation, because that's 90% of the whole game. If you don't have documentation in place, if you don't have your import documentation, your export documentation, the documentation that comes in the middle, that's going to be an issue. So use this time wisely to look at those documentation. Make sure you're doing audits, be audit ready. Make sure that your company is audit friendly. Make sure that all your ducks are in a row, essentially. C, I would also say, make sure all your teams are aligned, finance, logistics, operations. These are important teams that have to go together to make sure that your drawback program is successful. And having those teams, or, knowing who's doing what, who has what, who is in charge of the documentation, that goes a really long way, and I know that the shutdown and is this whole climate that we're in is really volatile, but I will say that, use this time to file a solid application so that when CBP resumes, and they will, it's faster. There's no wait back. There's no coming back to you with, Andy, you missed ABC, and then another 30 days until you reply, another 30 days before they reply. And it's an never ending, it can be a never ending game. So it can be a really long time. Make sure that in the first shot, you've got it right, whether it's a privileges application, whether it's any kind of audit, whether it's a custom request, whether it's a full desk review, to make sure that all of these are aligned even before you do the application.
Okay. So with that, then as you're going through, first off, you've got to have ACE access, right?
Yes.
So that should be a fundamental anyway. I think with the layoff come in, plus just the overwhelming volumes of things, I guess there's a backlog. I think you mentioned by CBP right now, just processing applications to give ACE access to an
Yes.
importer.
Yes, I mean, that has definitely slowed down things. I mean, it's easier if you already have ACE, but that's the backlog we're looking at. Even with ACE, with applications, with claims, with payment, there's definitely a backlog. So to your point, I mean, if you have ACE, that's great, but otherwise, making sure that you're ready to provide the documentation when CBP resumes, that's probably the best thing. Whether it's ACE, whether it's claims, whether it's payments, we don't have too much control over, but applications, claims, ACE, all of these things, yes, to be prepared is the best thing.
Do you feel that okay, so you got your ACE account, you're filing, you file a drawback claim, for example. Do you feel, let's say in a normal world, not during the shutdown, I know right now in the shutdown, everything's changed, but prior to that, because of all the new revenue making streams that CBP has, right? With all the tariffs and everything, they do obviously need to, the CBP officers or the CBP needs to keep up with all that. Do you feel that they may prioritize that over drawbacks, like collecting money versus refunding money? Like how do you see that as a strategy, I guess, for someone who is trying to do drawbacks?
In my
Great
opinion,
question.
I think, Lalo, that's a very good question, and that's even a real one, because you would rather think about getting money after such a situation than giving out money from your own pocket. I mean, in fact, I remember being at a conference. It was a trade professionals, a CBP conference, and one of the things they were talking about was drawback, but it was so low on the priority list. Also, there was something about there was something that was going to be coming out in terms of different trade fields, essentially. And I remember going up and saying, "Okay, this is really exciting. We would love to see this in drawback." And they were like, "We are doing a pilot program for ABC, and we'll get to drawback." That's a very valid point. That's an extremely valid point. That is definitely a concern, which is why even the blog that we were speaking about is something that I felt the need that we needed to address. Even as a company, is because record keeping is the best thing, because otherwise there's no way that's the only thing we can do, is what I'm saying. In the current shutdown, but there's very little that we can do, and there's even very little, unfortunately, that CBP can do. From our side, just having your documentation and your ducks in a row is the best case scenario, because I mean, they're going to come to us, but they're going to come to us later. You don't want to prolong that a lot more, you know
Well, let's talk a little bit about the process. It's like, okay, so we have the documentation and archive. We've emphasized how important the archive is. And so when you're working with a client, they give you all the information. And so what do? Are you filing a hard copy request for the drawback, or are you doing some kind of electronic entry and transmitting that?
It's all electronic. So when we have a proven process that we work with. And so, when our clients will send documentation, at least my team will look at all the documentation, review it, make sure that it's all good to go. We'll file an application. And once that application goes electronically, it's nothing as hard copy. We'll send that application to CBP. And then once that's done, we would start filing claims. So our operation teams would start filing claims. They would make sure, we're doing the claims as they're coming along. And those claims are liquidated once that privileges, as we call it, is essentially approved. So the time that we see usually is not in the liquidation, because those claims, they can be liquidated in 2 to 4 weeks once the major application is approved, which can take time. Usually by regulation, it's 90 days that it's supposed to be approved in, but we see a longer time with CBP. Again, the whole understaffed situation, processing can be slow. And so we see 6 months at an average, or minimum sometimes, is what we see. But once that is approved, that's the biggest hurdle. Then you're good to go. And then you're good to, see your claims being liquidated. And at that point, you also get your money back.
So are you able to go ahead and file the duty drawback claim before it's liquidated, and then but you're doing a pre-liq request at the same time? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. You file the duty drawback claims once you have submitted the application. It doesn't get liquidated until that application is approved. The reason why we do this is to lock in the 5-year period. So you can only go back 5 years. The statute of limitation only allows you to go back 5 years. So say, for example, the application got approved in November, and I decide to file the claims in November, but 5 years have you're done. And so for the last, say, in 2025, in 21, if you go back, or 2020, you'd miss that year, just because your 5-year statute of limitation is over. So that's the reason we keep filing, but that doesn't get liquidated unless and until your privileges is approved.
So here would be something that I would, what is it, maybe a CFO more than likely is more interested in the duty drawback than anybody, but an executive, if you will, of a company, what should they be asking their staff regarding have we been taking advantage of duty drawbacks? Should we go back 5 years?
When you say what they should ask their staff in terms of like what they have to do duty drawback, or in terms of if they should do duty
To see
drawback?
if they're even eligible. I mean, is there an opportunity? I mean, just because there's a duty drawback opportunity there and you sell internationally, let's say you've
Yep.
got, obviously you're selling domestically, but you're also selling outside the US.
Yep.
The question would be, just because you're selling internationally doesn't necessarily mean you would qualify for duty drawback, or on the flip side, you qualify and don't even know it. So, that's the other thing I guess that comes into play is what does an executive need to do from your perspective? What advice would you give the C-suite to say, hey, you need to check into this. Here's where to go. Here's the question to ask.
Right. I think first off, for starters, I would look at, what are you importing and how much of what you're importing are you exporting, whether that's unused, whether that's manufacturing, just like Lalo gave the example of whiskey and bourbon, how much of that is being exported? That's the first question. Because I mean, if you're importing 100% and then you're exporting 1%, technically in a financial sound situation, that doesn't really help. So the first fundamental question would be that how much of what you're importing is what you're exporting. And if the answer of that is good, like, okay, you're importing and at least 80-90% is what you're exporting, or even a lesser number, more or less, that's a good starting place. I would also say a lot of companies, at least our company, would have free evaluations, or, for you to kind of see if you're eligible. I would say talk to a drawback broker in that situation. Once you have an import and an export, then to be able to go into the different avenues of, okay, does this qualify, does this not, do you all have the proper documentation, do you have the proper process? Because a lot of the times, and I've seen in my experience, is people will qualify for drawback, but the majority of the times they probably don't work with the right vendors, or they wouldn't have the right documentation. They don't have the right software. A lot of these good softwares are in the market, but sometimes a lot of people, small companies, mid-sized companies, will have manual records or will have that as a normal course of business. CBP will not accept that. They're really thorough with their documentation. So those are the things that maybe you can speak to a drawback broker and get more information on, because only when they see that documentation or see what your internal process is like will they be able to recommend. But for starters, if you feel like you're importing and exporting, that's a good place to start.
Well, and there's also sounds certain that it would be one of those things where they could put together a task force,
Absolutely.
a group of people that, look at this. Here's our objective. We're looking to see, would we have the opportunity to qualify for some duty drawback going back 5 years? And if so, then what would it take to make that a reality to pull this all together? And you would definitely need, a company like yours to help lead that,
Absolutely.
champion the group, somebody within the group, probably your compliance area, but you would need your sourcing group, purchasing group, whatever,
Yes.
your transportation logistics, so you can keep track of the routing and bill of ladings and all that kind of stuff. Probably your accounts receivable and accounts payable, would you not think, on something like that?
Absolutely. And I mean, to my earlier point that I was saying, logistics, operations, finance, these play such an important role. In my experience, I've seen that, the successful programs, the ones that are really smooth sailing, are the ones who know exactly who to go to. Because sometimes, and like you said, Andy, I think it was such a valid point that a CFO will be interested the most in duty drawback. It's a revenue stream, it's a cash flow kind of situation. But they might not be the right person, to get the documentation, to understand and coordinate with vendors, to understand CBP regulations. It takes somebody who's in the field, in the roots, to kind of understand that. Maybe a person from logistics, maybe someone from operations, maybe a compliance person. And so having the right people on that call, whether it's a determination call, whether it's a call to collect documents, that
Mhm.
is such a game changer. And I feel like the most successful drawback programs are those that are handed over to the right person. Because a lot of the times we've seen that a lot of the clients, I mean, you are my client right now, but we're not filing a program until 6 months, 5 months. And sometimes a lot of that delay can be because they're connecting calls, they're reaching out to the right person, they're trying to figure out who the right person is.
Yeah, navigating. That's what I call bird dogging. You're trying to find the right folks to get
Yes,
back. Yeah, IT is another one. Is somebody that has access to not only the systems but where the archives are of that data and being able then to tap that. One
Right.
thing I will say, and Lala, this is something maybe you can speak to, is I've seen where, yeah, we've got an archive. And so the data has been archived, but nobody's ever done anything to try and extract out of the archive. And then when they go to do that, they find it's extremely difficult because it's almost like they dumped all the data in one big bucket. And then, well, where are the indexes here? And all? I don't know, but
Absolutely. I agree with that. I mean, I know, we had in the past a client, and this is a client who had, it was a manufacturing thing. The thing that Andy, you were speaking about, where you have to give all of those extra additional details of into production, out of production, how is the final product, how's that bourbon being made, essentially. It's a lot more with manufacturing. And this client had about, 20 contract manufacturers, 10 to 20 that they were working with. So that's a lot of contract manufacturers, partners you're working with, so many other vendors you're working with. Imagine one client who has to deal with so many other vendors to have a successful drawback program. I mean, they were perfect because they knew exactly who to put on the call and who could connect to these vendors, who had a relationship with them, and that came together so seamlessly. Something that can be so daunting, dealing with so many vendors at the same time to have a successful program can go as smoothly as if both the parties, your drawback broker and the client, know exactly what's happening. That sync is so it's not spoken about enough, but I feel like that flow and that sync is so important for a successful program and for a seamless program, I'd say.
excellent. Excellent. Well, I will say that with this, let's just kind of wrap up here with the benefits of going through all of this. Have you had some clients that you helped them start a duty drawback program and start looking at it and say, hey, you know what? You do qualify for something and all that. What did they wind up, where they, what was the benefit after all of this? Bottom line, we're talking about it, but I mean, there's some significant dollars in this.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's a strategic tool for revenue. It's not just, like I keep saying, a project at the side. I mean, so many of our clients, because CITTA has been in the drawback world for so long, even before drawback was trendy, I would say. It's been in the market for so long, and so many of our clients have been so happy with finding like a drawback program, knowing that they're eligible for drawback, essentially. To summarize, I feel like I'll use one code that a client of ours used, and I mean, it's something that we're very proud about, is saying it's like finding a $20 bill in your pocket, except it's millions. That's
Yes.
drawback. That's absolutely drawback for you, because you didn't even know that you're eligible for this, and then suddenly you see that it's millions, and the feeling is the same, taking a $20 bill from your pocket, except it's in millions, and then everyone's happy. That's drawback.
Well, I have
Unbelievable.
a story that Troy, who was formerly I guess he's a founder of CETA, but he's no longer with the company. But Troy used to tell me this story, or used to tell this story, where this was during the pandemic, that he had a client who, pretty much, we all know how the pandemic affected us, a lot of us. And what they did is that they discovered, quote unquote, drawback. And because they didn't have much activity going on, they were not really able to manufacture. So that company kept their employees on staff, and he kept them busy by having them, let's go and dig through these past 5 years of imports and see what we can. And they actually kept their doors open with all the drawback that they got back from all their claims. So they didn't necessarily have to rely on any government help or anything. And that was a story that Troy used to tell us, and I thought, wow, that's significant, because they did get millions back.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And it's a tool. It's something, I mean, I feel like everybody should at least see whether they're drawback eligible. I mean, CBP is still working. And only the processing is slower, and as you can imagine why. And so definitely use this time to make sure that, all your ducks are in a row, and then you can apply, and you can get accepted and find that millions in your pocket, I guess.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I will say that as with the trade agreements, there, again, new opportunities are being created, especially, right now we've got the UK situation. That's one of the first ones, Japan and whatnot, that have actually been signed and settled. So the point being is where US companies now have an opportunity to expand their market possibly in where they've not. And let's say we'll just talk about the UK for a second. Well, they may not have been looking, there's been a domestic company. I know I'm right now in central Arkansas, and there's a lot of companies here. Our U.S. economy is so massive, they only deal in U.S. domestic. Well, now there's an opportunity for their product that's manufactured to go over to the UK. Guess what? Some of your raw goods that you're bringing in or whatever, you may now be able to offset that and do a duty drawback, which is going to do two things. One, you expand your market, increase your sales, but also improve your bottom line by reducing your costs, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And well put, well summarized.
That's the business side of me. I keep looking and going,
Yeah.
and there's all kinds of things we could do
Which
here.
is why there was nothing else to add. I was like, well put. That's pretty much it.
Well, listen, we appreciate you coming on and talking with us. And if there's any new developments with some of these trade deals and whatnot, please reach back out to us so we can do an update
Absolutely.
on some things with the different trade deals that are going on. Because I know we have the trade deals, but then I know there's some of the duty drawback requirements that are getting
Yes.
Put into these trade deals. So that's a good thing.
For sure. And yeah, 100%. I would love to. And thank you so much for having me, Lalo and Andy. This was great. Thank you.
Yeah, here you go. I look forward to it. Have a good day, folks.
A good one.
Thank you.